Welcome to my preview of the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl. My goodness, what a mouthful. I had to restart the video 3 times to say that. It really is a tongue twister. I dare any of my viewers to say that 10 times fast. None of them will get through it. But anyhow, this is going to be a great game here between an 8-4 UCLA going up against a 9-3 number 18 NC State. Really probably one of the most underrated bowl games in the country this season. It's not a New Year's Six, but these are two top teams in their conferences, two Power 5 programs matching up against a UCLA team that took a huge step forward this year. I mean, they really took a huge step forward this year to Chip Kelly, went far beyond the preseason expectations. Really, both of these programs defeating the preseason expectations for them. So, great job by both of them making it to a good bowl. The Holiday Bowl here should be an excellent one. NC State, a team that was this close to being in that ACC championship game this season, and then UCLA, a team that was competitive right the way through for that Pac-12 championship, and of course ending up outside of it, but a very, very good UCLA team. This should be a very exciting matchup. I give predictions at the end of all my videos on who I think is going to win this one, and honestly, this was one of the hardest ones to predict. I'm going to let you know at the end of the video who I think is going to end up winning this game. So, like I said, 8-4 UCLA going up at 9-3, number 18 NC State, Tuesday, December 28th on 8 p.m. at 8 p.m. on Fox. So NC State also, so I said, it's hard enough for me to make up my mind on who's going to win this one. Well, Vegas can't decide either. They're giving NC State a 1-point advantage in that. I mean, that is one of the closest spreads of all of the bowl season this year. So that tells you how good a game this is going to be. This is not one that you want to miss a little bit later in the evening after a good weekend of bowl games, but definitely one that you want to make sure that you have your television tuned to. ESPN also close on the prediction, giving NC State a 58.5% chance of winning. So series history, UCLA is 2-0 in this bowl series, or not bowl series, sorry, but against NC State. So 2-0 against NC State. They played back in the late 50s, early 60s. 1959 was first matchup, 21-12 win by UCLA, and the 1960 win by UCLA 7-0. So NC State looking to get their first win in the series in the modern era of college football, and UCLA looking to prove that they're still the top dog in this bowl game. I keep saying bowl game, in this matchup, trying to get to 3-0. Record review for these teams, like I said, UCLA shooting above expectations. Remember, last season, 3-4. Now, yes, that was a reduced Pac-12 schedule with the weird COVID year, but year before that, 4-8. And Chip Kelly, in his 3 years so far at the program, only 10-21 overall. So even worse in his first year. So this is not I thought UCLA was going to take a big step forward this year. I didn't think it was going to be this big, but I did think they were going to get to bowl eligibility. I was saying 6-6. So was Athlon Sports. Both those programs were saying 6-6. But I said that UCLA was going to be this close to a much better year, and that next season, so this is UCLA kind of turning the corner under Chip Kelly. I think it was kind of a prove-it year for him, and I said I hope UCLA fans give him a chance to prove himself and stay on for next season, which thankfully he's going to get that chance after a good 8-4 year. But I said if they can get to this bowl eligibility, which I think they're going to do, which they ended up doing, I think that they're going to take a huge step forward next season. I think that next season UCLA is going to be competing at the top for that Pac-12 and maybe even winning that Pac-12 championship game, because UCLA is a team that I was very impressed with, some very, very close losses last season, and then this year took a big step forward. We're going to look at how they got to that in a second. For NC State, I was projecting 9-3, and they ended up exactly 9-3 there. Athlon Sports projecting 8-4. I have ties really to kind of both of these programs. One of my best friends is an NC State fan, and I've liked NC State ever since Ryan Finley transferred over to NC State. I watched pretty much every NC State fan because I was a big Ryan Finley fan. Once a Bronco, always a Bronco. So for those who weren't tracking, Ryan Finley started off his career at Boise State before losing the starting quarterback job to Brett Rippon and then transferring over. NC State also got our offensive coordinator that year. So NC State, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an NC State fan like I would call myself a Boise State or a Liberty or an Air Force fan, but it is definitely a program that I have watched for a long time and definitely have strong feelings for and enjoy watching them play. Now, UCLA, I'm a huge Chip Kelly fan. I was a big Chip Kelly fan when he was at Oregon. I was disappointed that the NFL didn't end up working out for him, and I was excited when he got hired here to coach for UCLA. So I really am rooting for both these programs in this game. It's going to be exciting to see what ends up happening in this one. But yeah, NC State ended up having the exact year I was projecting, UCLA just shooting above that. As far as how UCLA got to this point, so they started off with with a pretty bad loss, but it happened to a lot of Pac-12 teams losing to a Mountain West team. So it wasn't their first game of the season, but it happened early on in the year. They got a good win against LSU to kind of start things off, but they ended up dropping a game to Fresno State, who ended up being a good team this year, 10-3. But as the Pac-12, you don't want to lose to the Mountain West, but this season the Mountain West definitely owned the Pac-12. In fact, Sports Illustrated was rating the Mountain West as better than the Pac-12 overall this year. You don't often see that Group of Five conference rated as better than the Power Five. So not necessarily a bad win bad loss for this program, but it was their only non-Power 5 loss of the season, and actually it was also the only loss inside the state of California. We're going to talk about that here in a second, but doing very well against the state of California for UCLA. They also lost to Arizona State and then Oregon and Utah, but they only lost to Oregon by 3 points. All four of these programs that they lost to were ranked or finished the season ranked. Oregon, Utah, and Fresno State all finishing the season ranked, and Arizona State just an outside 8-4. So, like I said, a program that took a huge step forward and only lost to good schools here. And I mean, 3-point loss to Fresno State, 3-point loss to Oregon. Right in it with, not so much in it with Utah and Arizona State, but really close to having a 10-win season and wins against two of the top programs in the Group of Five and in the Power Five there. So a great year overall by UCLA. They have wins against LSU, and then they have wins against all three Pac-12 schools from California. For NC State, great, I talked about UCLA having a great year. NC State probably topped them overall as far as beating their expectations seasons before. NC State, they start off with some, or not start off, sorry, but they got a loss to Wake Forest. That's probably the worst loss on their record. Not because Wake Forest is a bad team, but because of what it meant. It knocked NC State really out of that ACC championship hunt. And, of course, that head-to-head ended up deciding Wake Forest moving on to to end up losing to Pitt, but ended up making it to the ACC championship game. But they were this close, 45-42. I was picking NC State in that game. I really thought they were going to win it. But Wake Forest, they both have great quarterbacks. But Wake Forest quarterback here ended up being just a little bit better, and they ended up getting that win. But throughout you look at these three losses, they lost 3 games by a total of 18 points. If you add up all the losses, if you add up all the point differentials, it's only 18 points. And actually, 2 of those were by 4 points. So they had a 10-24 loss early in the season against Mississippi State. 10-24 loss against Mississippi State. But other than that, they barely lost to Wake Forest, and then I believe it was Miami. I think it was 1 point loss to Miami was the other loss on their schedule there. So this was a team that was, again, like I talked about UCLA being this close to a 10-win season. This was a NC State's team that really, you discount the Mississippi State loss, they were this close to basically an undefeated season and at least going undefeated in conference and getting the ACC championship. So for an NC State team that has been competitive in the past but not really being able to cement themselves as a top team in the ACC, with Clemson having a down year and really the ACC overall having a down year, some surprising teams took that step forward, and NC State was one of those schools this season. And we talked about their big win. So we were talking about Clemson having a down year and NC State being able to capitalize on that. Well, they capitalized on that in a big way with a win against Clemson, 27-21, when Clemson was still ranked in the top 10 at that point. It's the first win that NC State has had against Clemson since 2011. And NC State is, we talked about them, being competitive in the past. Well, they've been this close to winning against Clemson so many times. I mean, they really have. I mean, they had 3 seasons there basically when Ryan Finley was with them, where they almost got that win almost every single year against Clemson. So the last couple seasons, yeah, Clemson's gotten the blowout, but you felt that it was coming. It's one of those times where every time it matches up, it's got to happen eventually. And NC State finally taking that win to take that, like we keep saying, big step forward here, not just as a team, but being able to get a win against the team that's been the top dog of the conference here for such a long time. Really the last 10 years, Clemson has been the team that's risen to being that top team in the conference. To get that win, that's a big statement win. It's a big confidence builder for a program as they continue to try and build themselves up to being an elite Power 5 team, and that is not what they're shooting for now. So NC State getting that win big, and this is going to be a great match between 2 great schools. It's also going to be a great matchup between some great players on both these teams. For UCLA, focus here, running game. Running back Zach Charbonnet, 1,137 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns. So I think UCLA ended up with 55 touchdowns on the year. I think that's right. It was like 52 to 55 touchdowns. He had 13 of them, 5.5 yards per carry. For NC State, their focus is the passing game, and the reason that they've had had such a successful season this year is because their quarterback, Leary, was a totally different player this year. He's had some promise. He's shown some spark in his previous 2 seasons with the program. He's only listed as a sophomore, but that's because of the COVID year, not counting towards eligibility. So he's only listed as a sophomore, but he has had 2 seasons prior to this. I thought he looked promising last year, but not really able to find that consistency. Well, this season, for the most part, of course, there was a couple of letdowns in some of those losses, but for the most part, finding that consistency, 3,433 yards passing, 35 touchdowns, and only 5 interceptions. Really one of the most biggest upsides for a quarterback this season as far as turning around from what they were coming into, what the expectations were, blowing those expectations out of the water and coming with such a massive season. And that he's the reason that NC State has found their success. Really not a reliable running game, not really any running backs that they can lean to. They got a couple of guys that they can hand the rock off to. So the success for this team runs through the quarterback position, which leads us into our keys of the game here for UCLA. It's pretty easy. Shut down Leary. Outside of the passing game, NC State only averages 126.2 yards per game. They basically don't have a running game of sorts. I mean, the running game sets up the passing game, but if you take away the passing game, they're not going to be able to beat you on the ground. For NC State, it's the opposite. Take away the running game. Take away Charbonnet. Every single win that UCLA has had, except for the win against Colorado, but every other win, so all 7 of the other wins, he has rushed for over 100 yards. In every single one of the losses, so all 4 losses of UCLA, he's been held to under 100 yards, actually under 90 yards rushing in every single one. So really, you take him away, UCLA falls apart. Now UCLA, I'm not saying that they're built around one player, just like I'm not saying that NC State is built around one specific player. Both of these teams are good team defenses, team offenses. They have other players that play a big role, but if you take away their main spark, especially on offense, it's going to be a hard one and a long one in these games, and it's going to end up being a disappointing game for the team that's able to capitalize and take away that key player. So prediction in this one, total shootout. Both these teams have not been very consistent on defense throughout the year, playing in conferences where their offenses that they're testing, and that's not necessarily the top offenses in the country. So I think that these teams are going to match up well against each other. I think it's going to be a back and forth. And my prediction on this is that it's going to be a shootout that is won on the final drive. Whoever has the ball last is going to either win this game or have a chance to win this game and maybe make a critical mistake that loses in this game. I think, it's kind of a flip of the coin here. I almost changed it prior to the video, but since these teams are pretty much evenly matched across the board, I'm going to go with NC State in this one, so I'll go a little bit with the heart as well as the head in this matchup. But honestly, I'm a big fan of both these programs, or I like both these programs, and I definitely would love to see both of them continue to find success. I love that both of them are finally finding their feet and establishing themselves as one of those competitive Power 5 teams. Not necessarily top tier Alabama, Ohio State level of teams, but not a lot of teams are. But on that upward curve, above average, above the middle of the pack teams, I love that both these programs are establishing themselves there, and I'm excited to see what ends up happening in this bowl game. Honestly, outside of Boise State, outside of Liberty, outside of Air Force, and really outside of Auburn, because I'm following Brian Harson's career. Really outside of that and outside the New Year's Six, this is one of the bowl games that I am most looking forward to. And I really hope that it gets some good viewership because it definitely deserves it. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure you like and subscribe. I'm going through every single bowl game this season, every single one. It's been a grind, but I'm getting my way through it. And I'm having a blast while I'm doing it. So make sure you watch those videos. Make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. And as always, go Big Blue!